I purposely have an organizational chart that goes from left to right and not from top down, because I want our staff members, regardless of what your role is, to feel empowered to make decisions that aren't on a yo-yo, meaning that the decisions don't have to come from the bottom up to the top and then back down to the bottom. If you have the right people in place that understand the vision and the direction that you're going, and then you empower them to make decisions and to do the jobs that you've hired them for, I think you have an opportunity for success. But you have to have the right people in place, and then you have to trust those people to do the jobs that you've empowered them to do.
Welcome to Unlocking Moves, the show where we try to highlight the key pivotal moments that really change the trajectory of the lives of successful entrepreneurs and leaders. And I want to hear their stories because I think we learn best from stories. And Hunter, I want not just the glory stories. I want to hear the gory stories. As I like to say, the bigger the shit show, the bigger the lesson. And I am pumped about my guest today because my guest today is the athletic director of my beloved Arkansas Razorbacks, Hunter Yurachek. But Hunter, before we get going, I like to hit my guests up with a off-the-wall question or comment to really throw them on their toes, get my audience on their toes. You ready for this?
Throw it at me, Kurt.
Well, I got to tell you that I've been a Razorback fan since I was born. My grandfather played football and baseball for the Hogs in the 1920s, and I was raised right. I was raised that the proper hog call is woo, pig sooie. At some point in the Chad Morris years, we picked up this woo, like wolf call. That is not a hog call. Can you set the record straight? Can you pass an edict, pass a law, or do something?
You're exactly right. It is woo. I think our track and field program especially likes to do the woo. Kevin Trainer, who's kind of the old guard around our department, often corrects people when they try to put that in front of it. But it is woo, pig sooie.
Thank you. And I'm going to expect the law in Washington County, state of Arkansas, whatever, very soon, passed by Hunter Yurachek.
You got it. You've got it.
As you guys can tell, my guest today is Hunter Yurachek. He is the athletic director of the University of Arkansas. He's also on the College Football Playoff Committee, which is a committee that chooses the 12 playoff teams for college football, which is new. He has a degree and he played basketball for Guilford College, the Fighting Quakers. And he has a master's degree from the University of Richmond, the Spiders. But before we go, Hunter, I've got one more thing to say. He is probably most famous for his most recent accomplishment, which is hiring Hall of Fame coach John Calipari as the basketball coach for Arkansas. There is a lot to unpack here. Hunter, welcome to Unlocking Moves.
It is my pleasure to make my first appearance on Unlocking Moves. Excited to be here today, and thank you for the opportunity.
You bet, man. Hopefully it's the first of many. But hey, before we get going, I know there's a lot we can talk about with the Calipari hiring. We can talk about the changing landscape of college athletics with NIL and the collapse of conferences and all that stuff. But I have a feeling you talk about those types of things a lot. So I'd like to cover some things maybe you don't cover every day. Is that fair?
Right. Fair enough.
Well, let's start. I want to start a little bit about your background. How in the hell does someone get into the athletics department and ultimately becomes an AD for a Power 5 and SEC team?
It is. I've had an interesting journey since I graduated from Guilford College back in 1990. As you mentioned, I played basketball there, and always just grew up playing football, basketball, baseball, swimming, diving, golf, whatever there was to do with a ball in hand. I wanted to do it growing up. So I always had a passion for sports. But I got my business degree at Guilford College and didn't really know upon graduating college what I wanted to do. So I recall being a waiter, a lifeguard. I rode side saddle on a UPS truck for 3 or 4 months. I was an assistant high school basketball coach. I was a high school substitute teacher. I worked in collections at a bank before I finally sat back and said, what do I want to be in life? And I went back to the University of Richmond, got my master's in sports administration. And I got some advice in one of the classes there. They said, if you want to get in athletic administration, you may have to work for free. Well, at that time, I think it was 24, 25 years old, and I'd just taken a loan out to go to the University of Richmond, which was not an inexpensive private school at the time and still isn't. So there's no way I'm working for free. I'm getting my master's degree. I'm too smart to work for free. Well, I went to an interview for an internship at the Deacon Club at Wake Forest University, and they had offered that internship to a Wake Forest graduate who came into the applicant pool late the day before that, but they still honored my interview. And I said at the end of that interview, when they told me that, is there anybody else here in your department that is looking to hire somebody? And they said, well, we just hired a new director of marketing about 2 weeks ago. He looks like he's overwhelmed. Maybe you should go knock on his door. So sure enough, I went and knocked on his door and started to introduce myself and asked him if he was hiring. He said he didn't have any money in his current budget, but if I came back in January, that maybe he and I could talk again. Well, this is May, and that light bulb went off in my head where I heard that professor telling me you may have to work for free. So I said, hey, I tell you what, how about I work for free from now until December, and if in January you have money, that I get the first crack at that internship. And he said, when can you start? And this was on a Friday. And I said, I'll start Monday. And so on Monday, I started working for free at Wake Forest University. And then sure enough, when we got to January, I got a big raise, Kurt, to $1,000 a month. And I made $1,000 a month for the next 18 months. And then I got a bigger bump to $2,000 a month for the next 2 years.
Let's
So
go.
I like to say I was in this business almost 5 years and had not grossed $70,000. But here's what I know for sure, that I was doing what I loved, and I loved what I was doing. And that is, I was passionate about college athletics and trying to make a difference in the lives of young men and women. So that's how I got into this business.
I want to pause there because I know there's a lot more to unpack once you got there, but let me come back to a couple of things that you said that I think are very poignant. Number one is you had the choice of learning or earning, and you chose learning. And I would give that advice to any new graduate or recent graduate or soon to be graduate, that take the opportunity early in your career to learn from others and seek mentorship as opposed to just trying to find a dollar.
I would agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm teaching a class right now here at the University of Arkansas, contemporary issues in sports, and we're in the last week of that class and really doing, these are all seniors, and trying to help them get into the sports business, whether it's college athletics, professional athletics, minor league baseball, whatever. And I've encouraged them that same advice that I received 32, 33 years ago, to go work for free just to get your foot in the door, so you have something to put on your resume, that you have some practical experience in the industry. Don't worry about what you will make. And I know that's easy for me to say, but go to worry about getting that experience first.
I absolutely agree. The other thing I heard with what you said was the circuitous route that you took to finding those first real opportunity. You sound like you had 4 or 5 different gigs, and I love that. I still struggle with what I want to do with the rest of my life, and I'm 55 years old, and it drives me batty that my young sons, who are just a little bit, or my sons, just a little bit younger than your sons, are being asked to determine exactly what they want to do with their career when they're a junior in high school. I love the fact that you kind of figured it out as you went and you sought mentorship along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, obviously I knew I didn't want to wait tables for the rest of my life. I didn't want to be a lifeguard, but I had to find some things to put some money in my pocket. But, and then I went to a bank and got into collections because I got an undergraduate degree in business administration. Said, well, let me apply that and see if that's what I'm interested in, but knew really early on in that professional opportunity that that's not what I wanted to do. So, I encourage the students that I'm teaching right now, go out and figure out what you want to do. You're still young enough that you can change career paths. Like, I'm 56 years old. I've been in this business now 31 years. A little bit harder for me to change career paths now, but when you're in your early to mid 20s, yeah, just the world is kind of your oasis, right? You can go find whatever you want to find, do whatever you want to do, and find what you're passionate about. Because once you find what you're passionate about, it makes going to work day in and day out a lot easier. Because if you're not passionate about what you're doing, like, I'm 31 years into my career, hopefully I'll get to 40 years in my career, but I'm passionate about this every day. If you have to do something for 40 years you're not passionate about, boy, that's going to be really tough, in my opinion.
Great advice. What's the old adage? If you do what you love doing, you never work a day in your life. I never understood that as a young man, but now I certainly do. Yep. Okay, so now you're at Wake Forest. You got the opportunity to get a big raise. You doubled your salary to $2,000 a month. But something happened from there. Something got you into beyond marketing and took you into more of the business side.
Sure. I mean, I went, so I got an opportunity from Wake Forest to go to Vanderbilt University to oversee their marketing and ticket sales program. So I went from really hands-on, being that the everyday doer of marketing promotions, to being able to oversee our marketing promotions activities and our ticket sales opportunities at Vanderbilt. I was there for 2 years. My wife and I just built a house in Nashville, loved living there, thought I was going to be there for a long time. Then my boss at Vanderbilt got the athletic director job at Western Carolina University in Cullowhee, North Carolina. And he said, Hunter, he said, I'd love for you to come and be my senior associate athletic director and oversee all of our external areas. And so this was marketing, promotions, ticket sales, sponsorship sales, the radio network, media relations, communications, everything on the external side of the department. And I jumped at it. My family, I was from North Carolina. My wife's family's from North Carolina. I arrived at Western Carolina without having asked a lot of questions, and realized that I was overseeing myself in many of those areas. So yes, I was overseeing ticket sales, but I was the director of ticketing. I was overseeing marketing, but I was the director of marketing. I was overseeing sponsorship sales, but I was the director of sponsorship sales. I was overseeing the radio network, but I was putting together the radio network. In fact, I was a sideline reporter for football. So, and I credit my time at Western Carolina as a small FCS school that had a really small staff for preparing me the best to be a director of athletics a decade after that, because I got to touch and feel every single area of the department, not only the external areas, but I had a seat at the table when we were making decisions about academics or compliance or the budget or the strategic plan for the department. And that was an invaluable learning experience for me at Western Carolina.
Well, there's a couple of things I want to touch on there. Number one is the fact that you were the chief cook and bottle washer at Western Carolina, and you saw a lot of different things, not too different than my entrepreneurial audience, where people have to wear a lot of hats when they're working for a startup or early stage company. The other is how you got the opportunity. And this is very similar to the quote regular world or business world. And that is doing a great job for bosses in your current job and leveraging your network for the next opportunity. So he so admired your passion and dedication and work product that he brought you over to Western Carolina with him.
Yeah, absolutely. He didn't give me all the details, Kurt, but he brought me with him because I think when he thought I knew I could handle it, right? He
Exactly.
thought that he'd seen me work at Vanderbilt in ticketing and marketing and the leadership skills I had there. And he wanted me to come there, knew I could handle the job of overseeing all of those external areas and actually doing it as well.
Hey, probably like a great entrepreneur, he sold you on the vision, didn't quite tell you all the details of all the crap
Sure.
you're going to have to do along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I left Western Carolina for what I thought was my dream job at the University of Virginia as an associate athletic director. My dad had gone to Virginia. My sister was in law school there. I grew up a Virginia fan and thinking, okay, now this is my fourth stop, but this is going to be the final one, as I explained to my wife, Jennifer. This is where we're going to be. And this was probably as you talk about unlocking moves, this was probably one of the first for me where 3 months into my tenure, I said, boy, I have made a mistake. The grass is not greener here at the University of Virginia, a great place to work. But what happened to me, Kurt, is I was the associate athletic director for marketing for their football program only. So I'd gone from having this incredible breadth of responsibility and experience at Western Carolina to just being pigeonholed into marketing their football program and overseeing their football program from an external standpoint, and knew that I wanted more than that. And so I stayed at my dream job for 2 years and went to the University of Akron in Akron, Ohio, where I got to oversee all of their external areas at the University of Akron, a step or two above Western Carolina. So they actually had a staff. They had a director of marketing and a director of ticket sales and a director of sponsorship sales and someone who ran the radio network. And I got to be in a leadership position there at Akron and really got to have that breadth of experience that I so enjoyed and become accustomed to at Western Carolina.
And I'm guessing that along the way, you learned to ask the questions before you took the opportunity, as opposed to after you were already on board. Wait a minute, I'm only just a football guy?
Yeah, yes, for sure. Absolutely. The AD at Akron at the time, Mac Rhodes, who's now the athletic director at Baylor, still jokes with me about how long it took me to make my decision to come to Akron and how thorough I was in asking so many questions about that job to truly understand the landscape of what I was getting into.
Hey, I'm about to ask you about your next move, which I believe is Coastal Carolina. But let me just pause for a second and comment on your, let's say, knack for the mascots. So you were a fighting Quaker, you were a catamount, you were a spider, you were a Chanticleer. I know you were also a Zip, and now you're a Razorback. What's with the crazy mascots?
Yeah, my wife says the same thing, and you forgot Demon Deacon's in there as well, right? It's like the one-off mascots throughout college athletics. And isn't it funny that they're the fighting Quakers, and Quakers are known to be pacifist?
Hey, I love the fact that you don't have any tigers or bears or any of the kind of
I do
standard.
not. No boring mascots in my life, for sure.
Perfect. We're going to quote that one for the SEC network, baby. Um, hey, so let's talk about the next one. So was it Coastal Carolina after that?
It was. And so, and I will say probably my next unlocking move, and I had a couple along the way, and it is Mac Rhodes, who hired me there at Akron. He got the opportunity to be the director of athletics at Houston. And I had been in Akron for 4.5, 5 years, and really thought I was prepared at that time to be a director of athletics. And Mac wanted me to ascend to that role after he left. The head coaches there at Akron wanted me to have that role. The one person that didn't see me in that role was the president of the university, and he hired someone else. And it was probably the most heartbreaking time in my life in college athletics, where, I mean, we loved living in Hudson, Ohio. It's just an incredible community. Loved being a part of the University of Akron community. And so he told me about 5 o'clock on a Tuesday that they had hired somebody else. And oh, by the way, the press conference is tomorrow morning. And oh, by the way, we want you to take the new athletic director and his wife on a campus and facility tour. And so you really have to pick yourself up by the bootstraps and dust yourself off, because one, you've got a disappointment, but two, you still have a job as the senior associate AD at the University of Akron. You got a new boss, and you've got to put your best foot forward for him. But fortunately for me, 3 months later, I got the Coastal Carolina director of athletics job. And while I had an incredible disappointment at Akron, I think God truly opened another door for me that in the end was a much more valuable door for me to go through. I may still have been at the University of Akron today if I had received that job. But instead, I got to Coastal Carolina University, which was an up-and-coming FCS school that had significant resources, was pouring those resources into the athletic program because they thought their athletic program could really put their campus on the map. And, Coastal Carolina went from being an FCS school in the Big South to now they're in the Sun Belt. They won the College World Series, unfortunately, the year after I left. But they've been an incredible athletic program since then. And so, one door shuts, but I'm a true believer that it shuts for a reason, because God's got a better opportunity, a better plan for your life.
And I was about to say the same thing. I know there's purpose in the pain. I know it was painful at the time. And I know you're a man of faith, and that was God's way of saying, hey, I've got something in store for you, Hunter, and it's not here.
Yeah, for sure. And he showed me a different path, and it was a much better path for myself professionally and our family personally.
Awesome. And I know from there you took the opportunity at Houston, and thank goodness you are now the AD at Arkansas. And I hope you're there for a long time. As a fan and as a booster, I'm all behind you.
I hope so as well. And you touched on connections earlier, and I got the opportunity to interview at Coastal Carolina because the men's basketball coach at Wake Forest when I started was a guy by the name of Dave Odom. Coach Odom is retired. Coach Odom went to Guilford College, ironically, and he took me under his wing and really was a mentor to me. And I had been gone from Wake Forest for 15 years when I got the opportunity at Coastal Carolina. But his best friend in coaching was Cliff Ellis, who was the men's basketball coach at Coastal Carolina at the time, and he called Coach Ellis and made sure that my resume got lifted to the top of the pile, and I at least got my foot in the door for an interview. I had to break that door down, but I at least got the interview. And I think it's important for your listeners to understand, especially your young listeners, like you can never burn a bridge, especially in a small industry like college athletics, because you never know when you need to walk across that bridge again, or go back across that bridge, and how powerful connections are, not only in college athletics, but throughout your professional life.
No question. Connections in life, and your reputation is gold, and that's going to come back to your benefit, or maybe to haunt you in the wrong cases.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate that background, Hunter. I want to shift gears and let's talk about really the correlation between the college landscape, football, sports landscape, and business. Most of my audience are entrepreneurs or people who work with entrepreneurs and CEOs. And on the Hog Pod podcast you had with Bo Mattingly the other day, Bo asked you a question: what does the athletics director do? And you gave a great answer. I'd love to dive into that answer and talk about how it correlates with the business world.
What did I say?
You said something along the lines of, my job is to hire the best coaches and give them the resources to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is my job, is to work alongside our head coaches, and you've got to hire the best coaches and assistant coaches and our support staff to create opportunities for our student athletes to have success. And when our student athletes have success, we'll have success as a department of athletics. Our success doesn't come before our student athlete success. And so as an athletic director, I've got to work with our coaches, and they've got to tell me, okay, here's what we need to be successful. Here's the resources we need. Here are the facilities we need. And it's my job to clear that path for them so that they can concentrate on coaching and having success with their student athletes. And I provided them the resources and the tools and the facilities, et cetera, that they need to be successful.
I want my listeners to go back and re-listen to that clip, substitute the words leadership team for coaches, and substitute players and student athletes for team or for employees. And you've got the job of a CEO.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because when you're leading an organization, you want your people to have success. When your people have success, your organization will have success.
You also mentioned something about making sure that they have the right staffs and the right people on their team. I know that can get pretty expensive, especially in today's landscape of college athletics. Tell me about what it means to have the right people on the team, not just the right coaches.
Yeah, you absolutely have to have the right people on your team that buy into the culture that you're trying to establish. Here at the University of Arkansas, we have a culture where we're family first, and we're very much about being servant leaders to each other and providing those opportunities for our student athletes to have success. And so, I don't see leadership for me as a rank. I see it as an opportunity to serve others.
If you're just joining us on Unlocking Moves, today's episode is brought to you as usual by Hire Better, the strategic talent partner for growth-minded entrepreneurs everywhere. So, Hunter, in the business world, we hire a great team so we can sell more widgets or sell more services or whatever and try to add to our bottom line. In the college athletics world, obviously there's a money-making part of it. There's also a winning part of it. And there's an element that the more we win, the more students come to our university, the more we, whatever. How do you balance the ROI on that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kurt, because, we obviously have more return on their investment in our football and men's basketball programs than we have in most of our other programs. I mean, we will spend 7 figures on our men's and women's track programs that have won 50 national championships here and bring a lot of notoriety and publicity across the country to our university. But yet, when you talk about what do they sell in tickets, what do they sell in sponsorships, what do they gain you in actual media exposure? I mean, that's 6 figures at best. But yet we're spending 7 figures to generate that. In most business practices, that wouldn't be a good business model, right? To spend 7 figures to earn 6 figures. But it's part of what makes college athletics interesting. Now, in the flip side of that, our football and men's basketball programs, they generate about 90% of the revenue that I use to fund the other 17 sports. And so those sports have to be successful. And I will make decisions that are in the best interest of those sports being successful, because if they're successful, it will help our other 17 sports being successful. And I have to be very transparent and that with our other 17 coaches, that they all believe their sport is the most important, and it is incredibly important. But football and basketball at this level have to be successful for you to have a successful overall athletic program.
Well, I appreciate that. I also learned, I know a little bit about the Learfield Directors Cup, and I know that there's, Arkansas has done a great job of being in the top, 10, 15 over the last few years. I just learned the other day, listening to a previous podcast, that there are 20 sports that are measured, and Arkansas only has 19. So what can we do to add that extra sport? Do we need what do we need?
Yeah, well, we've got some other sports that are being discussed, especially from an equity standpoint. But right now we have our own challenges just funding the 19 sports that we have. And you're right, they have been very successful. And we do miss one of those metrics when competing for that Learfield Directors Cup title. And we've been in the top 10 2 out of the last 3 years, and that's out of 350 schools. But right now we're financially where we are, we're in a really good spot. And to add another sport, well, I either have to increase my revenue somewhere or cut my expenses somewhere, and that would impact negatively those 19 sports. And so I think we'll stay at 19 for the foreseeable future, but 20 is not out of the realm of possibility as we look forward to some of the challenges from an equity standpoint.
All right, great. So I want you to know I've got a crack research staff.
Okay.
And we tracked down a 2018 article that mentioned you and Guilford College, and it's on the topic of mentorship, which is one that I'm very passionate about. You mentioned a mentor at Guilford who inspired you. His name was Herbert Appenzeller, if I got that right, who was, and I believe the quote was, a professor, AD, everything. And the quote was, "The way he taught really just piqued my interest in this field. He really encouraged me to go back and get my master's degree and pursue a career." Anything you want to say about Mr. Appenzeller?
Yeah, Dr. Appenzeller was the best. He's left this world now, but he left a indelible mark and imprint on me as an athletic director. I mean, it didn't matter that it was at Guilford College. I had an athletic director and a coach that made a difference in my life. And even when I left Guilford, I could call Dr. A, up until 7 or 8 years ago when he passed away, and talk to him about anything. And he was the one that pushed me into this profession. He'd actually started a sports administration program at Guilford my junior year. I took a class or two in that, but was too far along in my business school. And he told me that he saw me as an AD, and he thought that was, as I was going from all those professions I talked about earlier, and he was trying to mentor me and show me a path of something that he thought I would be passionate about. He identified athletic administration for me.
I love it. And I do a lot of preaching, if you will, to mentees to seek mentorship. And this is a great plug, an opportunity for folks who are further along in their career to reach back down and mentor others. You never know what impact you're having on them. Dr. Appenzeller perhaps knew what an impact he was going to have on you 30 years later, but he probably didn't. And I want everyone in my audience to think about how they can give back to the next generation, so to speak.
No, I agree that I don't get paid $1 to teach this class every Tuesday and Thursday morning at 8 o'clock. I do it because I want that next generation to have the same kind of mentor that I had, and understand, if you want to get into the profession, what sacrifices you have to take, what it'll take. I just love giving back to young people and meeting with them one-on-one, teaching a class, whatever the case may be, because I had people as when I was in my early 20s that were pouring into me and making sure that I took the right path.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate Dr. Appenzeller, many like him. Okay, we're at the point of the show where I ask you about your unlocking move. You've already mentioned a couple. These are, again, key pivotal moments or decision points that really change your trajectory. Anything else you want to touch on or highlight from what we've already talked about?
Well, I think, a big unlocking move for me that really helped catapult me to the University of Arkansas was that, when I went to Houston, I went to be Mac Rhodes, hired me at Akron, but then he hired me again at Houston to be his associate vice chancellor over athletics. And he encouraged me, "Hey, Hunter, I'm going to be here 3 or 4 more years. My daughter's going to graduate from college, and I will set you up in a position that you can be the next director of athletics here at the University of Houston." So I took that leap of faith and left the athletic director job at Coastal Carolina to do that, because I was having a harder time getting out of Coastal Carolina from an FCS school at the time. And 6 months into my tenure at Houston, Mac got the Missouri job. Well, I'd only been there for 6 months, and I hadn't had a chance really to get to know the president at the University of Houston, the board of trustee members, those key decision makers. They gave me a courtesy interview, and I found out later it was a courtesy interview. And I did so well, they gave me a real interview after the courtesy interview, right? And but I didn't take the courtesy interview for granted. I was incredibly well prepared for that. Did a great job, and they didn't believe that I could have interviewed that well. And then they brought me back again for a second interview. And the gentleman that was at the chair of the board of trustees, you may know him in Texas, Tillman Fertitta, very well known restaurant entrepreneur and casino and et cetera. And the Fertitta family's well known. He was the one that finally made the hire, and I had to really meet with him a couple of times, and so that was an unlocking moment for me because I don't get that opportunity. I'm not sure where I'm sitting today. But now I'm sitting here at the University of Arkansas as an AD in the Southeastern Conference at an incredibly special institution.
Man, talk about opportunities. And what I like to inspire my audience is when you have those opportunities, seize them. And you clearly did. And you took the extra step and got prepared and were ready for the interview. I believe and hope that you inspired people for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to ask you another question. And that is, I mentioned to you my book, called Who's Your Mike? And Micah Strother was very helpful in helping me with a couple of things in that book. I got a quote from Dave Van Horn for one of the chapters. One of the characters of the book is B Player Bob. And B Player Bob is, I wanted to try to show that B players are people too. And not everybody is, quote, an A player. The A player is defined as somebody who is in the top 10% of their class and who would, there's a lot of definitions for an A player, but I believe a B player is powerful too. My quote from Dave Van Horn says, it's the role players who made the great teams great. The guys who showed up to work every day and worked hard, knew their role, and did their job with no drama. Those are the guys who put us over the top. And I want to go a little bit further with a scrappy point guard from Guilford College on the basketball team. And one of your teammates said about you, he just played so hard, relentless, really, when we were down or a little sluggish, and all of a sudden Hunter's in there running around and is in his opponent's face, diving after balls. That's the sort of thing that reminded us that's what we need to be doing. So I want to ask you, Hunter, were you a B player? And tell me about the importance of B players on the team.
I was definitively a B player. I knew my role. I wasn't a star, but I just wanted to be a part of the team. And so I knew, oh, what a great picture there. I just knew that I was going to have to, if I was going to play, I needed to do the little things. I needed to dive after loose balls. I needed to take charges. I needed to bring the ball up the court and get it to the people that could really score. And I just wanted to play on it and be a part of a team. And those guys on that team are still some of my best friends. And that's what being a student athlete is all about. And you've got to have those players. And I think you just look to the transfer portal in this era right now where you're building teams, and especially basketball teams that have 13 players. If you get 13 stars to come in, you're going to have a hard time having a great team because you have to have some people that know their roles. And that's what's impressed me so much about how Coach Cal is building his team right now. He's got 6 players, but they all have definitive roles. And then he's going to fill in the back end of this roster, players, 9 through 12 or 13, with people that he knows what their role is coming on. And okay, here are the stars on the team, but here's the supporting cast. And I think every great team has a great supporting cast. You got to have your stars, and which I guess you're referring to as your A players, and you got to have your B players that they understand what their role is in your team, your organization, etc.
I love it. And for the audience, we had a picture of Hunter as a presumably 20-year-old or so point guard at Guilford College that I threw up there on the screen. We'll make sure that's in the show. I appreciate that. I agree with you. I think there's such a in the business world, there's got thought leaders in the middle market space that are always talking about A players. And the reality is there's some pretty damn good players who are really solid players that you want on your team. They're not aspiring to be the CEO. They just want to do their job well and go home. And they're great people to have on the team. Okay. So Hunter, we're at the point of the show where I like to serve as the listener's advocate. If I'm a listener to this podcast, I want to know what kind of question Kurt's going to ask Hunter Yurachek, something that's on my mind. there's a lot of directions I could go with this, as you know. Number one is I'm so glad you made the decision to put Coke products in the Razorback stadiums as opposed to Pepsi. Thank you. That's already done. There's other ways that I could go, and you and I joked about this the other day about it. But I want to ask you a few, and you can tell me which ones you want to answer. How do you balance NIL versus your capital campaigns? That's one. How do you balance maximizing the atmosphere and winning and drawing a great audience with making money? You kind of talked about that a little bit already. And the third is maybe a little more nuanced, but that is for CEOs, they report to a board and they're ultimately accountable to shareholders. Your job's not too incredibly different. You have a board, but you also have large money donors and there's a whole world of politics, I'm sure, associated with that. Where would you like to take the question? You can answer the one you want.
Yeah, I can answer any of the three. I'll start with the first one, the NIL versus capital projects. And we've tried to find a balance between the two. I'm not sure there is a balance right now. I think NIL has taken precedent over facility projects. We have a soccer operations building and a softball operations building we're in the final design process. They're ready to put a shovel in the ground, but the money that we may use for that may go to NIL in the future. It may go to revenue sharing in the future as we begin to settle some of these lawsuits. So they're a little bit on the back burner. And I equate it to when our professional athletes come back to our facilities to train, I ask them, hey, is it more important what your paycheck looks like or what your professional locker room, weight room, training room looks like? And 10 out of 10 will tell you, I care what my paycheck looks like. And we used to use those incredible facilities, and we're blessed with facilities here at the University of Arkansas. We're actually ahead in the facility game, but those were your shiny penny. Those were your recruiting tool that coaches said we have to attract the best student athletes. Coaches don't say that anymore. Coaches say, I don't care about the facility as much as I need you to help me find resources from an NIL standpoint. And so, but some donors don't care for NIL. And they still care to build or help you build a facility that will benefit thousands upon thousands of student athletes or thousands upon thousands of patrons that could walk through Bud Walton Arena. And so I would say our preference now, our priority has fallen to NIL, but we can't change necessarily what the donor priority is. And sometimes the donor does not want anything to do with NIL. They want to do capital projects. Sometimes they say, here are the resources I'm able to provide. Hunter, as a director of athletics, you decide where you want those resources to go for the betterment of your department.
And I would bet that the theory is the more you can raise with NIL, in theory, the more you can win. In theory, the more you win, the more people show up and the more people buy tickets and the more you can do capital campaigns. Although we saw that Texas A&M failed with that a couple of years ago with their large money NILs to students. So you obviously still have to win, even if you pay a lot of money.
You do, and I think you may have been sitting in the meeting room at the Razorback Foundation. Is the exact conversation I had with the Razorback Foundation because we're asking them now to help us fundraise for NIL, not necessarily their job responsibilities. They've been fundraising for their scholarship fund. They've been fundraising for capital projects, and it's like, hey, your job in fundraising for the annual fund and for capital projects will be a lot easier if we are able to put a great team on the court or on the field. And so we need you to help with this NIL piece, and that will help the other aspects of your job for sure.
And a quick sidebar for any of my audience who's been living under a rock for years, NIL stands for name, image, and likeness. It's how college players are now paid legally through sponsorships and whatnot. Okay. Any of the other questions you want to tackle real quick, if it's of interest?
Yeah. I mean, I think, the question about the board and donors and one of the things I learned from Mac Rhodes is managing up. Like I've got to make sure that I am communicating up. Like I've got my own organizational chart for our department goes from left to right, but the organizational chart for the university goes top to bottom. And so I have to manage up to the chancellor, and I have to manage up from the chancellor to the president, and the president to the 10 members of our board. And then I've got to manage up to our key donors and constituents that are providing significant resources and really want to be communicated with and have a voice within our department. And so that's part of my job as a director of athletics, is to what I call manage up to those constituents to make sure that they are well informed. Because if as an AD, if you're not keeping your president, your chancellor, your board, and your key stakeholders informed of what's going on in your department, you're going to have a hard time moving forward.
And I'll tell my listeners again, replace board or board of directors or advisors or shareholders with what Hunter just described as managing up. And that's the job of your CEO, is to continue to manage, lead the team, but also manage up. Okay, Hunter, I've got one more question for you. It's a little bit of a trick question.
Okay.
And that is, I'm looking for one question that you're never asked, and either you secretly wish they would ask you, or maybe you're kind of glad they don't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the question, but people ask me like, what are your hobbies? What do you do for fun? And I say, like, we've got a house at Beaver Lake, a little cabin. I love getting out in the water. But the thing people don't know about me is I'm a closet professional wrestling fan. Having grown up in Charlotte, North Carolina, wrestling and racing were two big entertainment values there in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I have continued, and I really don't know why. I guess it's maybe the male soap opera and the male drama. And but still on Monday night, I'll catch myself flipping through the channels and stopping to see WWE. And my youngest son and I will sit together and watch WrestleMania together, because I've got him into it. And so people may say, like, you're a wrestling fan? Yes, I am a wrestling fan. So no one's ever asked me a question, are you a wrestling fan? But so I don't know if I want them to ask me that question, or I'm glad they have never asked that question.
That's awesome. As a kid, I watched a lot of wrestling too, with the Von Erichs, and was it Ric Flair or somebody Flair, and then the Andre the Giant and some others. That was awesome.
So we had a all staff meeting on Halloween this year, and I dressed up as Ric Flair. I had the robe with the little feathers on it. I had the white wrestling boots. I had the blonde wig. I had my championship belt. And we played Space Odyssey 2001 as I walked in the room with a little smoke. And so that was how I entered the staff meeting on Halloween this year.
I'm going to have to ask for pictures of that so we can put it with the show notes here, Hunter.
I'll send you a picture. I have one on my phone.
All right, perfect. Well, hey, on that note, we're going to wrap this puppy up. Hunter Yurachek, thank you so much for joining me. For the audience, please go like and subscribe Unlocking Moves wherever you consume your podcast. We'd appreciate some more 5-star reviews. And again, Hunter, thank you so much for giving me a lot of your time. I know you've got a lot of things going on, so I appreciate you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on today. Great job.
Awesome. Thanks, Hunter.